Protecting the kids. According to Americans United for Life, the worst states in the protecting life arena are Washington State, California, Hawaii, Vermont, Montana, Oregon, and New York. And now New York Governor Andrew Cuomo wants to make abortion laws even more liberal in the Empire State. 41 states restrict late-term abortions, and New York does as well, saying you can't destroy a fetus after 24 weeks unless there's a threat to the mother's life. Cuomo wants to change that, making a threat to the mother's health the law. Of course, that could mean anything, as we saw in Philadelphia with the monstrous Dr. Gosnell. Here once again, Megyn Kelly. Why is Cuomo doing this?
He is sort of trying to reach out to female voters, I guess, because his platform goes beyond abortion rights and talks about domestic violence and other items that he thinks he's trying to rectify.
He's attaching them all together. Right.
But in terms of the abortion issue, by the way, Dr. Gosnell was performing illegal third-term abortion. So it's not like Gosnell was getting around the law by saying it's based on health or life. So I don't know that he's the best person to compare it to.
Well, here's why
he's trying to change the law to say you can get a third-term abortion in New York State if it's to preserve the mother's health.
But here's why I use Gosnell, because part of Gosnell's defense, and you interviewed his defense lawyer as well as I did, was that, the woman's health was impacted. All right, so she walks in, she's going to give birth 2 days hence, and but you know, she's had anxiety. That's impacting the health. A health exception can mean anything. It's not defined. Am I correct?
In most states, that's true.
No, at the federal level.
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that because in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was 1992, which sort of was it came after Roe and clarified Roe versus Wade, they said you cannot abort a viable baby. They sustained that piece of federal law, saying you can't abort a child in utero if it's viable. But once it's become viable, there still have to be some exceptions. So if the mother's going to die, even though she's carrying a viable child inside of her, she can still have an abortion. And as far as the health exception, Planned Parenthood versus Casey said you have to have a health exception, but states are allowed to define it very narrowly.
But here in New York, there is no definition in this bill.
Right. So now Governor Cuomo's expanding that.
If you have a sprained thumb and you want to abort that baby 2 days before it's born in New York, if this horrible bill passes, you can. Now, this is what people don't understand. 41 states have restricted late-term abortions, and one of
they also have health exceptions, by the way.
And by the way,
third terms.
One of my godchildren was birthed at 26 weeks, and he is now a brilliant kid and a championship tennis player.
Wow!
Just so everybody knows what we're talking about here. So, 41 states have said, you know what? We're going to make it very hard for you to abort after 24 weeks. But federal law could override that, correct?
Well, the federal law sort of set the bare minimum standard and said this is, you know, it comes down to viability. If the child in utero is viable,
and that's after
then
24
it has
weeks.
certain rights.
Then it has certain rights. But in New York, it wouldn't have any rights realistically. Because any health to the mother would give
there have to be standards built in.
But there aren't any.
When there's a health exception, there have to be standards built in. That's what was happening with Tiller too.
Tell me what health standards specifically are built into the New York law.
I can't. I don't know how they're going to define health of the mother.
There aren't any.
That's the problem. And you know, at the federal level, the one thing they have banned is, remember when they allowed partial birth abortion, which was a horrific procedure.
And now that's been outlawed.
And the feds banned that and said you can never do that, and there can never be a health exception that would allow you to do that. And the Supreme Court upheld that and said that's right. But they didn't say you can never have a health exception in the third trimester for a different abortion procedure that is not a partial birth abortion. So it's still legal at the federal level.
But this law in New York State, if it passes, would be a horrific, brutal law. And that's what it would be.
It puts a lot of discretion in the hands of doctors.
Of abortion doctors, some of whom will do anything, as we have seen.
As we saw in Pennsylvania.
All right. Megyn Kelly, everybody, playing more head.